on the freezing sea ice of Hudson Bay, sight is entirely useless. But to the largest land predator on Earth, this howling wind is a detailed map. A map leading to a ringed seal, hidden beneath 3 feet of solid ice. Today, we track a single scent in real time. But as the ice begins to shift, can he reach it before this 14-hour daylight fades into total darkness? Beneath a massive snowdrift, a colossal shape stirs. This is the polar bear, the undisputed apex predator of the ice. Rising slowly, the immense white monolith shakes the frost from its heavily insulated coat. As he lifts his head, his hyper-olfactory senses flare to pull in the frigid air, forming the most sophisticated biological radar in the animal kingdom. Following at a cautious distance is the Arctic fox. Wrapped tightly in its pristine winter coat, the tiny scavenger moves like a silent ghost over the crusty snow. Lacking immense physical bulk, the nimble fox relies on absolute stealth to survive on the frozen remnants left behind. To walk in the shadow of giants is to secure a fragile guarantee of tomorrow. Watching this silent migration from elevated, frost-heaved mounds on the coastal tundra is the snowy owl. Perfectly camouflaged, the raptor sits with paralyzing stillness, her piercing yellow eyes absorbing the dim dawn light to spot microscopic movements below. She represents the silent vigilance of this environment, a permanent observer of the endless game of life and death, playing out on the freezing tidal flats. These leads are vital lifelines for mammals trapped beneath the ice. Gliding smoothly just below the surface is a highly social beluga whale pod. Lacking dorsal fins that would catch on the jagged ceiling, their brilliant white bodies navigate the narrowing corridors with effortless grace. By a biological imperative to breathe, they break the dark water, their blowholes snap open, releasing magnificent plumes of misty breath that instantly vaporize, beautifully broadcasting their exact location to the sky above. Hovering expertly on cold thermal updrafts is the glaucous gull. This massive seabird patrols the fractures, waiting for whales to push tiny fish towards the surface. It shares the overcast skies with the Arctic turf, a relentless traveler executing precision plunge dives. Farther along the jagged coastline, a massive colony of walruses has hauled out of the freezing tides. Weighing over a ton each, these heavily armored giants huddle tightly together in staggering numbers. By forming a dense biological fortress, they create a localized pocket of shared body heat. Their deeply scarred skin and magnificent ivory tusks provide an impenetrable layer of protection. This defense dictates a mathematically calculated truce even with starving apex predators. As daylight illuminates the sparse plains, massive herds of native caribou endure the biting winds. They trot urgently across the snow. Using specialized hooves, they relentlessly scrape away the hard, frozen dirt for dormant lichen. Fluttering erratically around their moving legs are flocks of the native snow bunting, tiny songbirds capitalizing on the immense physical labor of the larger mammals. To survive the devastating cold, these resilient birds aggressively puff out their delicate feathers, trapping a life-saving layer of warm air. Hidden deep within the frost-covered brush lies a fiercely territorial wolverine. Armed with sharp claws, this tenacious scavenger tracks the herd. Yet, even the wolverine instinctively yields the right of way when the white bear patrols. By 10 o'clock, the bear has marched countless miles across the utterly flat, desolate expanse. This relentless migration demands a continuous expenditure of caloric energy. To prevent slipping, he relies on heavily textured black footpads covered in tiny gripping papillae. The wide structure of his paws perfectly distributes his massive bulk, silencing his terrifyingly heavy approach. The target of this stealthy, agonizingly slow stalk is the thick, blubbered ringed seal. Trapped by a ceiling of solid ice, these highly paranoid mammals maintain narrow breathing holes carved directly through the frozen surface. These tiny, dark portals of life create perfectly localized, deadly ambush points for the waiting hunter above. When the polar bear finally locates a breathing hole, the terrifying mastery of his hunting strategy is revealed. Lowering his heavy body entirely against the bare ice to minimize his visual profile, he inches forward. His razor-sharp claws soon rest millimeters from the water. Consciously slowing his breathing and heart rate, he enters absolute tension-filled stillness. Beneath the solid 3-foot-thick ceiling, a hidden ancient ecosystem operates in complete darkness. It is sustained by microscopic ice algae that bloom in the frigid waters, forming the critical base of a complex food web. Swimming with lethargic slowness through these supercool depths is the Greenland shark. Living for centuries, this sluggish predator patrols the dark fractures with calculated, energy-conserving movements. The layered complexity of this real-time nature is truly astounding. Separated only by a few feet of vertical space, colossal masters of the white ice and ancient hunters of the dark water share a single, brutal habitat. They exist in parallel universes, completely unaware of one another's presence. As the day stretches past noon, a deceptive, low-contrast midday lull settles over the Arctic. Despite the extreme atmospheric cold, overheating is a massive, life-threatening danger for the incredibly insulated polar bear. The extreme physical exertion of leaping across massive pressure ridges forces him to violently conserve his energy. Sprawling flat on his back in fresh powder, he lazily kicks his legs. During this profound rest, an unspoken truce falls over the north. The majestic gerfalcon perches quietly on an ice ridge, conserving its lethal energy, while the caribou stand perfectly still against the coastal winds. Resting innocently and completely exposed on a perfectly flat patch of bright white ice is a fluffy, newborn harp seal pup. Born directly onto the unyielding frozen ocean, it has no shelter, relying entirely on its pristine white fur for camouflage. Its mother frantically surfaces in a nearby dark waterhole, her eyes scanning the horizon. She must urgently guide her vulnerable offspring to master the freezing water before roaming predators detect their scent. Sensing the microscopic vibrations of doom, the harp seal mother aggressively nudges her pup. And together they slide frantically backward into the pitch-black water. They vanish a mere fraction of a second before a massive 1,000-pound paw crashes down onto the empty edge. By 3 o'clock, the temperature plummets rapidly, causing the shifting sea ice to groan and crack under immensely contracting pressure. The narrow open leads begin to freeze shut with alarming speed. Suddenly, locking onto a fresh, rich scent, the polar bear abruptly abandons its stealth. He explodes from a slow walk into a terrifyingly fast run. Dropping all pretense of silence, he unleashes an explosive charge, his heavy paws violently smashing into the hard snow crust to generate inescapable speed. 6:30 in the evening, deep dark blue twilight has completely consumed the sky. The sea ice forms slightly later and fractures a fraction earlier each decade. Nature does not judge. It simply reacts to atmospheric physics, subtly rewriting the biological timelines of every creature here, forcing them to adapt to a shrinking window of opportunity. Driven purely by instinct and the agonizing mechanics of starvation, the colossal white bear continues his endless patrol. He navigates the treacherous shattered blue ice boulders, carefully maneuvering his immense bulk over the jagged ridges. He slowly blends heavily into the deep, encroaching shadows, maintaining his reign as the undisputed, solitary king of the frozen wilderness.
No force of nature can halt its steady march. Behold the terrifying determination of the world's greatest land predator.
Finally, at 7 o'clock, total, absolute darkness claims the frozen expanse. Stripped of his vision by the pitch-black reality, the exhausted predator halts in the center of the vast plain. In a breathtaking display of raw power, he lifts his massive paws entirely off the ice, standing perfectly and terrifyingly straight on his hind legs, towering over 10 feet tall. He points his massive black nose straight up into the roaring wind, taking a majestic inhalation. He precisely aligns his olfactory system to flawlessly filter microscopic particles, locating his next prey hidden miles away. Dropping heavily back down, the magnificent white bear walks purposefully away into the absolute blackness.